Okay, can you guys stop talking in my ears? Model-Theoretic. I'm gonna type this in my notes. Theoretic structuralism is what?
Coherent.
Give me a second. Is coherent.
Yeah.
Okay. So model-theoretic structuralism is coherent. That's just the prop right there. That's what you're affirming. So obviously,
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you to properly explicate that schema there. But first, I have some preliminaries, right? So okay, I want to ask you, what do you mean by model-theoretic structuralism? And I want to ask you, are you saying that the mathematics is only about structures instantiated across models?
The mathematics is only instantiated across. You said what?
Are you saying that model-theoretic structuralism? Are you saying that the mathematics is only about structures instantiated across models, or that objects are exhausted by?
It describes how. Yeah,
Okay.
Logic,
So then, what is your theory of
and
coherence
truth
there?
and consequence.
What's your theory of
You
coherence?
said
What's your theory of coherence?
theory of coherence.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really think that's necessary. As long as I provide a sufficient definition, I don't think a proper theorem is needed.
Okay.
Do you want a definition for coherence?
Listen. I don't even think that's proper, because we can say that a definition by itself is not enough, to be honest, under my scheme. So I can say
Why not?
I mean I can even ask, like, what's your theory of argumentation? Because are you saying that once you define a view, because you're gonna say you're just gonna define a view, right? That automatically makes it coherent? Because under my account, the definition and coherence are obviously distinct.
Well, I mean, a specific theorem is at least going to tell us a definition for what we mean by when we say coherence. So if I give a definition, then technically, yeah, I believe that would be sufficient. And even just asking theory of argumentation, I think that question is kind of weird.
Why?
Well, I mean, if you're already making some sort of dialectical move, you're already committed to some theory. And I mean, that could just lead into some sort of regress where you could say, well, I mean, what sort of theory of argumentation would even license the previous theory of argumentation?
Wait, you're already committed to what?
We could just go into. Yeah, you're already committed to another argumentative theory. Because, I mean, if you present the question what theory of argumentation you hold to, that's already a dialectical argumentative move within the given, dialectic. So, I mean, you could still go into some regress where you say, well, what theory of argumentation would even license that theory?
So listen, I can ask, okay, so listen, I don't that doesn't even get you out of cashing out the standard. That's the question, right? I'd agree that, I'd grant that, if someone or if somebody makes a dialectical move, they are already committed to some theory of argumentation, right? I can agree with that, but obviously that is exactly why I'm asking their theory of argumentation is not that's exactly why I'm asking it, right? So obviously,
no,
because
the whole point is I'm saying the question is incoherent. It's self-undermining because you can't ask it from any sort of neutral standpoint. Right, which is why I said if you ask
the fact that they are committed to a standard does not tell me which standard they are committed to. For example, a theorem can define terms. A theorem can define terms. I agree with that. I'm fine with that. But the theorem still relies on what counts as a valid inference and what logic is being used. So those are all theory of argumentation, these type of things, or what counts as an inference, or what counts as logic being used, or what axioms are in play within a conversation or dialectic. There, obviously, those are all theory of argumentations and philosophical grounding questions, of course, right? But under my account, saying that they already made a dialectical move is not enough, because there are rival dialectical standards. So one person can think contradiction is fatal per se, and then another can be paraconsistent, and one person can think that abduction is strong evidence, and another can deny the explanatory inference entirely, right? So yes, I can agree that they are already committed to some standard, but that is exactly why I would ask them to cash out which one, and why that one governs, and why you should even grant it over rival accounts or rival views.
So you are biting the bullet on the fact that there would be some sort of vicious regress?
What do you mean?
Well, that was the whole point of my critique that you didn't seem to address, right? I said that if one was to ask, well, what theory of argumentation are you abiding by or adhering to? Well, that same question is then subject to the question of what theory of argumentation even licenses that previous theory of argumentation. So, which is why I said it's self-undermining, because if you're proposing that we need some sort of developed theory of argumentation to even engage in the dialect, well, then there's no philosophical exchange that can even happen. It sort of trivializes everything. Because even developing the theory in itself would be something which is philosophically achieving in nature. So it requires some sort of prior
Okay,
or
I don't agree with that.
constituent.
Yeah, I don't agree
It
with that at
constitutes
all.
a prior theory of argumentation.
That doesn't follow. So I think you're conflating asking for the governing rule with infinite regress. Those are not the same thing. What your theory of argumentation, or well, I mean, I'd ask you like I could ask you questions like, what is your theory of regress here? Like, are you saying that every request for justification automatically generates vicious regress? That's I'm not asking you to answer that right now, because under my account, if you were saying that, that is obviously way too strong, because we can have a lot of views, and the chain stops and stop the chain somewhere, right? Where axioms, primitives, or default rules, burden allocations, or dialogue norms, or inferential practices, or maybe foundational commitments, right? So when I ask what's your theory of argumentation, I am not saying every standard needs every like every standard needs infinite justification forever, right? Like I am asking you personally, like I'm asking you to cash out which standard you are relying on and why I should grant it rather than like a rival account or a rival one, right? Because we can obviously take a rival view here specifically, a rival view here based on what we've been talking about in this community. We can take a rival view here and say that some rules are basic within the paradigm there, within a paradigm, right? And we can say fine to that. But even then, right? You still have to identify the rule. Quick example, so you can go like are you using classical logic or pair consistency, right? Because this type of things like are not regress questions, right? Those are clarification questions.
You don't think they can be both? That's not mutually exclusive at all. The whole point is that I'm saying, like,
no.
If you agree that there's no theory of argumentation,
no. They can be both in different senses, but that still does not save the objection, right? Like, sir, a question about theory of argumentation can eventually raise deeper questions about what justification theory itself is fine. Like, I'm fine with that. I can grant that, right? But watch me still grant that and still counteract what you're saying, because that right there, like, that does not count. That does not mean every request for clarification instantly creates a vicious regress, right? There's a difference between asking. No, but I'm clarifying. There's a difference between asking what rule you are using and asking what justifies that rule, right? And these things are obviously distinct, because under my account, I can ask questions. I can ask questions about what you're adopting. Oh, what's your theory of contradiction per se? Like, let's say, what's your theory of contradiction, right? And then I don't need an infinite chain at all. Like, maybe you can just say, oh, I'm using classical logic, and I can say fine. But now I know that the schema you are relying on.
Well, yeah. Well, okay. Well, then if you agree that there's no regress, I mean, that sort of just agrees with what I'm saying anyway, because you would be committing yourself to the fact that you can still argue competently without any sort of developed or systematic theory of argumentation. In the same way that, like, you can almost, use language, the English language as we are using it right now grammatically, without even having any knowledge on the generative grammar of the English language. So, like I said, if you don't think that there's a theory of argumentation that is needed to license the previous one, well, then that just means, again, we can rigorously talk about these things without even having those set theories. But if you disagree with that, well, then that puts us into a regress, which trivializes the entire dialect.
That trivializes what?
The entire dialect.
Okay, no, I don't agree with that at all. Because, okay, listen, what we could say is just that, honestly, I don't even think that follows, because, okay, I think you're conflating can participate in argument without even explicating. Or without explicating, stating like the theory with, right? Okay, so boom, like okay, let's say there's a conflation here. Like, there's a bridge there that I need you to bridge. So, like, I can agree that people can argue without knowing formal argumentation theory, the same way people can speak English without knowing linguistics. I think I'm fine. I think I'm fine with that, right? I can grant that. But obviously, they still are relying on rules and structures and default burdens or defaults or burdens and inferential practices, like, whether they obviously realize it or not. Because under my account, because I was even talking to Mason about that. Under my account, you can rigorously talk about without explicitly, like, naming the theory specifically, right? I can agree on that. I can grant that. We can both agree on that, right? But the second, obviously, there's a disagreement within the dialect, that we have a disagreement about what counts as evidence, contradiction, or burden, or proof, or defeater, or relevance, or the hidden machinery becomes important there, right? Where we have to identify there or classify these things, obviously. Because if I say contradiction is fatal and you say contradiction is survivable within your paradigm, right? We need to cash out the governing rule there. Because if I say abduction is enough, as I mentioned earlier, you need to you deny the explanatory inference, right? We need to cash out the governing rule, right? Because, like, simply, I can agree that people can use the language without explicit knowledge of the generative machinery there. I think that's fine, but that does not mean that the machinery is not there. That does not mean that the machinery is not there. It just means that it's implicit. We can obviously take a rival view here, and I can say that argumentation theory becomes most important precisely when the underlying standards stop being shared. So, under my account, all you really shown here with your objection is that people can argue informally without naming their assumptions. I think that's true. Like, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, that was the entire point. I never denied that these commitments are not going to be there. In fact, I think that you can't even say any claim that doesn't invoke some sort of like semantic framework, some consequence relation, or any domain that has obviously like an interpretation, or a domain that ranges over interpretations or has an interpretation. But yeah, that's all I was going for, right? So if you're saying that we do have these implicit background commitments, and if we don't need to name them explicitly there, then what's the point of even naming the first one explicitly? We have a lot of presuppositions that can just go not undermined, but that can just be kept underground to let the conversation progress, in which we don't need to stop and ask these questions like, oh, well, what's your theory of argumentation? Because again, we already presuppose a lot of these things, right? In fact, if you're also holding a classical logic, which I don't know yet, but I'm just going to assume you are, we could just, again, as a classical logician, you're already built upon a lot of implicit machinery, right? So like, we have the models, the way that, a model is just defined as a domain and interpretation.
So,
with the interpretation
shared commitments only matter until they are disputed, though. Okay, shared commitments only matter until they become disputed, right? Because if we both are using classical logic, right, then I do not need to stop every second, obviously, and ask what's your theory of contradiction, because we already share the same governing rule. But the second, obviously, you start using contradiction in some special way, or relying on abduction or coherence, or and let's say you're using an expert consensus, right? Or maybe you're saying that I'm burden shifting, or maybe you're using these modal talk or modal terms or modal claims or some weird inferential bridge that I'm just not privy to. Then obviously I am going to ask you to cash it out, right? What's trivial is asking for theory of argumentation when nothing is in dispute. I can agree with that. I can grant that. But what is not trivial is when you say that follows, or that proves it, or that's evidence, or that's contradictory, or that shifts the burden, or that's irrational, or that's impossible. If you're saying you're not doing any of that, I don't want to debate you anymore.
Is that to say that you are saying that I'm using an unconventional or idiosyncratic theory of argumentation implicitly currently?
What?
Yeah, you said if you are using some sort of special variation of what you are invoking, I'm obviously going to ask you for the theory of what you are saying. So that's why I asked, are you then saying that what I am doing is invoking
I'm saying that
theory?
That's like bad track. So listen, that's not. I'm not necessarily saying
that's what you said.
No, that's not. I am saying that the more unusual, controversial, or technical, or non-obvious your position is, or your move is within the dialect, the more pressure there is to cash out the governing rule underneath it, right? If you say modus ponens is valid, and we both already are holding to like classical logic, right? I do not need to interrogate that much, right? If that is the case, I don't have to hold to that, right? But if you say contradiction is survivable, or explanatory or explanation is evidence, or possibility implies reality, or expert consensus shifts the burden there, then under my account, I would obviously I'm going to ask what theory of argumentation or philosophical grounding licenses any of those moves there, because those things are not neutral moves; those are conditional on background commitments. So we can obviously take rival accounts, or a rival view here specifically, and say that many people make idiosyncratic moves within the dialect without realizing it, right? Because they think their moves or their standards are just quote unquote common sense. And under my account, the point is not to say that it is not that for which you are weird in so saying that. I'm not saying you're necessarily weird. I'm more so saying the point is that the move that you could be making is doing work, or more work, than you are acknowledging yourself. So cash out the hitter machinery under your view there.
I mean, that kind of goes further into what I'm saying. If I'm obviously upholding the proposition, the initial thing, which is just that model-theoretic structuralism is coherent, then obviously I'm going to be going under some sort of Aristotelian theory of argumentation, maybe, or even, I don't really see any other sort of thing that I could be holding to. And again, the thing that you already said earlier, I kind of forgot what you said earlier, but if you are agreeing that there is no theory of argumentation, there's no need to ask for all the... Hold on.
Yeah.
If you said
holding
that
a model-theoretic structuralism is coherent, does not automatically commit you to Aristotelian argumentation theory. That's very confused. Well, with their argumentation here, right? Are you saying coherence itself is an Aristotelian standard? You're not saying that, right? I hope not.
No.
Okay.
No.
So you can.
It's just that model-theoretic structuralism itself is a classical view. It's classical logic.
Yeah, like I responded to that. Listen, when you say model-theoretic structuralism is coherent, like I'm asking you, what exactly are you committed to? That there is no contradiction, that the relation can be consistently modeled. Like,
which is why I said if you wanted a definition, I don't think the theory itself is necessary. And I could give you a definition that is fully exhaustive, that can at least tell you what I mean by coherency, or it can be non-exhaustive, and just be very like simple.
Okay, listen, bro. So for a bare definition, fine. Theory of argumentation is not necessary. I can say that. But if you just ask, oh, what is model-theoretic structuralism, right? I can obviously give the definition without needing to stop and ask about burden, evidence, and contradiction. Yeah, like right, but like let's say the second, right?
Yeah, but that's the whole point that I'm getting at. Okay, but if you don't think we need to stop at every second, then there's no need to even ask initially, that's not what because it means that we can continue in the conversation with standard reasoning.
No, that's not what I'm agreeing to entirely. Under my account, definition tells us what the view says. Argumentation theory tells us what would make the view succeed, fail, cohere, contradict itself, or beat a rival view. Those are different. I want to conclude.
I mean, yeah, sure, we can conclude, I guess.
All right, bro, we're done debating.
Okay, guys, so who won?
I wasn't listening.
Okay, well, I'll just like go person by person. I'm not even gonna ask CM.